This is Support is Sexy, episode 210, with best-selling author Benilde Little. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I interview inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and their lessons to help you take your business and your life to the next level and create something sexy. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so excited to have you here because it just would not be the same without you. And today I am thrilled about our guest. We have the legendary best-selling author, Benilde Little. And Benilde is also known from her years as a pioneering entertainment editor at Essence magazine. In fact, in this episode, you will hear Benilde and I refer to a lot of women just by their first names: Monique, Mickey, Susan. These are all powerful women who were doing incredible work at Essence years ago, and they still do incredible work today, both inside the industry and outside of the industry. But you'll hear us refer to those women throughout this episode. You know, you can go to supportissexypodcast.com to see links to find out more about each of these women. But in this episode, Benilde really opens up to us about her journey from being an editor at Essence and really transitioning to becoming a full-time author. She has written several books, best-selling books, and her latest memoir is called Welcome to My Breakdown, a very open-hearted sharing, very vulnerable, being very candid about her experience with depression, overcoming depression, and that stage of her life that she went through, and being able to set a safe space for other women to be able to share in the same way. So I know you're going to love this episode. What you'll also hear from Benilde is why it's important to see yourself as an entrepreneur, even as a creative, how to know when what you're doing may no longer be your quote-unquote song. I love what she says about that. The importance of having an accountability partner. Embracing your quote-unquote weird side. I'm all about it because I consider myself weird in a good way. Also, owning your sensitivity and vulnerability. Getting over your quote-unquote shoulds. And channeling your experiences into your creative work. So if you're a writer, I know you're going to love this, but even if you aren't, I think you'll appreciate this idea of channeling your experiences into your work and how to figure out a way to make it all work together for you, for the person that you are and the type of work that you want to create. All right, so now without further ado, Benilde Little. So Benilde, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Me too, Elayne. It's great to reconnect.
Absolutely. So first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
I was thinking about that question because, I've been, a freelance and full-time author for 20 years, a little bit more. And I just started thinking of myself as an entrepreneur recently.
Right.
I think as a creative, I think more about myself as a creative person. So the sort of being an entrepreneur is nuts and bolts. It's like business. And I've just never seen myself that way until fairly recently, where I just started carrying my books, like keeping them in the trunk. I never used to do that. People would say, "Oh, can I buy your book now?" And I'd be like, "Oh, you can go to the bookstore."
Right.
Amazon, and now I have them with me and, I sell like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, not just like that, but so it's a fairly recent phenomenon.
What do you think was the turning point for you that helped you realize, you know what, I am an entrepreneur?
Monique is one of my best friends.
Yes.
Greenwood, and who is more of an alpha entrepreneur and probably hanging out and going up there a lot to both her place in down the shore and then the new place in Pennsylvania, where there were always women gathered, women as guests, and they'd be like, and she would be like, "You don't have your book? Why don't you have your book?"
Right.
And so that, I guess, and I think probably this whole self-publishing phenomenon, even though I haven't ventured into that, I've always, been with Simon & Schuster, but as publishing has changed, you do have to do a whole lot more. They do less, they want more. So, setting up a website and, doing the blog and tweeting and Instagram and all that. So I guess, the advent of social media kind of pushed me more into, the notion of an entrepreneur.
And even the big publishing companies, like you said, want you to do more.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, I keep saying to my agent, what are they doing? Why are they getting all this
They're
money?
just printing it for you. They're like, market this for us.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, where did you grow up, Benilde?
I grew up in Newark, New Jersey.
What was a young Benilde like?
God, that's a good question. Weird. Not too different than I am now. But here's the thing. So a lot of people don't know that I'm weird now. People who don't know me, people who know me know.
I think I'm weird too. And I just recently started loving it about myself.
Right, exactly. You don't really present that way.
Right.
I present that way. And so when I was little, I always felt like quirky. I, of course, didn't know that word, but I didn't really feel like I fit in like my family, except for my mom, who got me. And so like my extended family, my brothers, also I was the only girl, so that didn't help. But yeah, I was just kind of like, let's have a parade kind of kid. In school, I made this family, in sixth grade, we were all like Pam was the grandma. And so, and then I started getting picked on as middle school because, the kids don't like weird. And again, I think if I presented weird, it would have been better. But I presented, kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but they didn't like me too much. Mm-hmm. Look, I seemed fancy. So, but, I always say that made me a writer. That being bullied, it sort of forced me to look at myself and look around and sort of try to figure out why people did that. Why do people do that? What's inside of them? So
I think the why is such a big thing for a lot of writers. I know that was very much what my thing was with understanding why were people mean? Why do they do that? My mom is the person who used to always try her best to explain it to me, but I always had I don't understand, but why would they do that? Why do they? So, and then as a writer, it just makes you want to examine that why even more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In your book, Welcome to My Breakdown, you mentioned that you were quiet and thoughtful and sensitive. So I was going to ask you, was writing sort of an outlet for you as well during that time?
I didn't really write as a little kid. I made up stories, but I didn't really write them down. I made up stories around my Barbies, but I didn't really write them down. I didn't even who knew you could be a writer?
I know.
I didn't know anybody, certainly anybody who looked like me, who did that. I was introspective. I wasn't really quiet, but I was definitely introspective, and I wasn't like I was always drawn, like most of my friends were real extroverts. I am literally half. I'm literally half extrovert, half introvert. Mm-hmm. So I forgot what the question was.
Was writing an outlet for you being introspective?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just, I like spending time in my head. So once I exhausted myself from all the interaction with other people, and I'm still like that, I have to retreat and
recharge.
Yeah, just let my head just be in my head. Okay, what do you really think? Because it's hard for me to really think when I'm, with a lot of people and bombarded with stuff. So
when would you say that writing then became sort of your thing? When did you know that this is what I'm meant to do?
Well, I was a journalist first, and the way that happened was I took a year off between high school and college. They call it a gap year now. Then it was just like, I'm not ready to go to college because I have no idea what I want to do. So my mother let me go, and actually made me think it was my idea, which was brilliant. She was brilliant in so many ways. Let me move in with my brother who lived down south. He was 7 years older than me, so he was already like in his career and everything. He was on radio. So I lived with him in Jacksonville, Florida, and just kind of hung out with him, and he was on the radio, and so he knew all these interesting people, and and so he was like, you should think about journalism, and you should think about Howard, because Tony Brown started the School of Communications, and Tony Brown at that time was like a big, journalist. He was, Black. He had something, I forget I guess it was Tony Brown's Journal on TV at the time. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. That sounds like something I can do. So I was always good at talking to people, kind of getting them to, tell me stuff. And like I just did with you, like asking all those questions. And not because I guess I am kind of nosy, but I'm really interested. I'm really interested in people and what makes them tick. So being a journalist was appealing to me. And the writing part was just kind of secondary. I didn't really think that much about the writing. And then being at Howard was just amazing because we were on the newspaper staff. That's when I met Monique. We were sophomores and on the newspaper, and it was so much fun. It was fun and it was serious. And so, but here's what happened. So then after a couple jobs in between, I went to Essence, and I was in charge of entertainment. So I did, all, books and movies and blah, blah. And the book stuff, you saw before that, I was at People magazine before that. And at People, I would go out and interview different people, but the writers were always my favorites. So like Judy Blume and August Wilson. And the thing about them, it was like that I met my tribe. So that, people, you'd spend a lot of time with people. It wasn't be like a 2 or 3 interview day. You would spend days with them. So you'd go back, you'd see them in different environments. And I remember one day spending part of an afternoon with Judy Blume in her apartment. She lived up by Columbia, and we sat in the window seat. And I swear she must have cried 3 or 4 times during the interview. And I loved that. I mean, she'd be talking, and not like sad. It'd be like just moved, and that's how I was as a kid. I swear I must have cried every day about something. And not sad. I mean, sometimes sad, but just being moved by things. And I just was moved by her. And then with August, it was a similar, just bleeding, going through life from a heart space. And that's how I am. And so that part, so it was like the writing comes from that. It's not so much that, some people just love the act of, writing in a perfect sentence. I'm not that. It comes from an internal place where I want to connect with the human condition. That's where the writing comes from for me.
Wow. And what fantastic people to have sort of open that up for you, Judy Blume, August Wilson. So after you interviewed people like that and went back to your day-to-day job at Essence, at what point did you transition, or did you say, I'm going to write a novel?
I'm glad. Thank you for getting me back on track.
No, that's okay. Essence, I love the story.
At Essence, so like I said, one of the things I was in charge of was the book stuff, book reviews, assigning writers to review books. And so I would get the books in galley form because, our lead time was so great. And so I would read some of the books and be like, not galley, manuscript form. Right. Manuscript. And there's a big leap from manuscript to galley. And it's a big leap from manuscript to actual book. And
just I got a very early version for people listening.
Exactly. Right? And I got to see, it doesn't come out fully formed and and that was what did it for me, because I was like, I can do this. I had started writing Good Hair, my first novel, 8 years before it came out. And I wasn't diligently working on it. I would, but I created the characters when I was still at People, because I was, at Howard, I remember Monique and I would always go back for homecoming. And I remember sitting there and being struck, and this wasn't the first time I noted this, but being struck by people in the stands, 3-4 generations of Howard graduates. Mm-hmm. And I was struck by that. My parents didn't go to college. And, this notion that there are Black people who, have that in their families, like generations of college educated folks. And so I started turning around this idea of social class. Of course, that idea didn't just come to me then. It really came to me when I went to Howard. But the idea of social class, among us, mm-hmm. and all the sort of baggage, the psychological stuff that comes along with that. And so I came up with these two characters, Alice and Jack, the main characters. And, I kind of ruminated on them for a long time and just wrote brief, maybe 10 pages on each, and then kind of put it away. I mean, I would think about it, but I was, working hard and, and on the weekends just exhausted or lazy or both. And so, so that was more like me wanting to say something about that, about social class among African Americans and the stuff that we do to each other in the name of that.
And it took you 8 years altogether to complete the book and get it ready to deliver to a publisher?
Well, once I worked on it in earnest, it took me about 1.5 years. Mm-hmm. Every day, quit my job and worked on it every day.
What was that moment like when you decided to quit your job? And because especially at that time, well, still, but I haven't been there in a while, but I know working at Essence was really such a passion for most of us who were there.
Yeah, it is. It's like a family, and it's intense, and it's your life. And it was that for me. And I loved Susan. Susan loved me. I love my colleagues. Linda V was my best friend, still one of my best friends. Linda Villarosa there, and I knew Harriet from college, and it was very comfortable, mm-hmm. and I could have been there for years. But here's the thing about that. There are lots of things pulling at us that look really good and sometimes feel really good. But for me, it wasn't my song. Mm. Mickey, her cubicle was next to mine. And, Mickey was so into the beauty, everything about being a beauty editor. For me, I liked pieces of it, but it wasn't like I said, it just wasn't my song. It wasn't in my soul. And the writing, and the more I, would look at the books and read the books and go to author things, I just felt like this is my song and this is really what I want to do.
I love that. How did you, I just thought about the quote from Wayne Dyer, "Don't die with your music in you."
That's nice.
Yeah. So it sort of, you reminded me of that. So how did you, or do you remember at that time what gave you the courage to say, I'm moving on and doing this? Was it just, like you said, that idea that you knew this wasn't your song? And I ask because so many of us do end up getting stuck in places, even though we know this is not it.
Yeah. So I'm leaving out a giant part, which was, I got married. And so I had a financial support system.
Okay.
And, and the thing is, my husband wasn't thrilled that I quit my job, but we were, newlywed. So we had no overhead. We didn't have a house. We lived in an apartment that we could afford on one salary. We had a old cheap car. So I knew that the moment was right then. Because if I didn't do it then we'd start, building and having a kid and all that stuff. So, but like I said, he was not thrilled. So I took a risk with that because he could have just said, you know what, I'm out. Mm-hmm. But, and so it was good, though. Every day he would come home from work, and I would literally work all day on my book. And he would come home and say, okay, let me see what you wrote today. And I would have to show him.
That's good. That's sort of like he was your accountability partner.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. So now that you had Good Hair, which is a bestseller, phenomenal book. And then The Itch was after that. Mm-hmm. And now you have a memoir or a memoir, as I saw.
Wait, no, I had 2 more after that.
Two more. What were the 2 more after that?
Yeah, I had two more after that. A lot of people miss those last two books, and it really hurts me because you love all of them. It's
of course, they're all your babies.
They're all my babies.
What were the two more after that? What am I missing?
So after The Itch, there was Acting Out. Because you know why? Because there were a few years. They wanted me to, they were coming out every 2 years. And I was like, no. So it was 4 years when Acting Out came out. And then I think it was 2, maybe 3 years after that Who Does She Think She Is came out.
Okay.
And then there was a big hiatus. And then Who Does She Think She Is? Welcome to My Breakdown.
Welcome to My Breakdown. I'm going to make sure I link to those so we can I'm going to link to everything, of course. But we can make sure we see all of your babies. That's my fault. Acting Out, Who Does She Think She Is? Now I have to read those. I didn't read those too. Yeah. So what was the big break then between Who Does She Think She Is and Welcome to My Breakdown, which was your latest book?
Well, this is where the whole working for yourself, it's like Dave Chappelle, where keeping it real goes wrong. The plan was, okay, so I had the second kid. So my daughter was up and thriving, and she was, I don't know, first grade. No, she was, before I was born. She's 6.5 years older than her little brother. So when she was young, I was writing, doing the book, Good Hair came out when she was already born, but it was written. And then the second one, The Itch. But I had my mother taking care of her, so I didn't even have to think about it. I could go on the road, blah, blah, blah. And then 6 years later, I had this little boy, and he is still yummy. He's 16 now. But so, I'm like in this career thing. So I have hired help because my mom at this point is too old to help with him. And so, I had like nannies and this and that, and, and they were all fine. But at some point I just felt like I needed to step in and really put my thumbprint on him. So the plan was to take 1 year off. It was a long answer, but the plan was to take 1 year off and kind of get him from nursery school into kindergarten, and then he'd be on his way. And then I got him into kindergarten, and then I started looking for some part-time help, couldn't find anybody. And my mother was like, you don't want nobody, you don't want no help. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're right. So I'll take another year and be with him. And I was really happy. We got a puppy. I would walk him to school every day with the puppy. And you know what Montclair is like. It's,
yes.
Yeah, it's pretty. People are interesting and friendly. So anyway, but then 2 years turned into 3, and then into 4. You saw that in the book, and then 5. And I wasn't so happy, but I didn't quite know how to get out of it. And then my mom got sick, and my mom died, and so I just basically fell apart. So that's what happened.
And from that experience, that's when you began to write the next book, Welcome to My Breakdown, from that time period of what you went through during that time?
Basically. But, I didn't intend to write a memoir, not at all. I thought, who cares, when people are writing memoirs, unless they were like, August Wilson. And it's like, but I was just stuck. I was just, in the psychic pain, and I didn't know what to do. And, I'm not a big journal writer, but I would just write just random thoughts. And then I would send stuff to my agent, who's my good friend. And, and after a while, she was like, I think there's a book here. And I was like, really? And so I just started sending her pages. And I think I started feeling better, just not even at the idea, the prospect of it becoming a book, but just getting stuff out and having somebody else read it,
Right. And being sort of back to one of the things that you really love doing.
Yeah. Examining. Mm-hmm.
Right. And in the book, you also share that you, dealt with depression during that time after your mom passed.
Yeah.
Did the book writing, I should say, help you get through that time? Or what was it that helped you make it through and sort of overcome it? Well, first, I think, what helped you realize that that's what you were going through? Because sometimes I think we miss that part of a lot of people's stories too. How do I know if I'm depressed?
Absolutely. I mean, but for me, it was, I couldn't get out of bed. It was more than just blue. I've been blue, melancholy, most of my life. So I knew that this was bigger than that. So therapy, I started, and I had been in therapy before, so it wasn't like big and scary for me. I actually sort of like it. I know that sounds weird, but
no, it doesn't. I get it.
Yeah. So, cause it's this, unraveling, it's, taking stuff apart and, looking up.
And I think especially when you're already a person who does that anyway, as we talked about earlier, you are, and I have been. And then when you can talk to someone who sort of helps you do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause all they are sort of midwives. People think it's like, oh my God, I won't be myself, or this person is telling you what to do or what to think,
right.
And it's not that at all. So anyway, so therapy, and then eventually meds, because it was just not budging. That's kind of, and then, getting the book going, definitely. Yeah.
How did you, you mentioned that you knew that this was different than just being melancholy. Was it because of how it felt or your behavior during that time? For example, not being able to get out of bed and that kind of thing, or a combination?
Both. Yeah, absolutely. It was both. Because my behavior was like, you're just flat. You're just like in front of the television and we're drinking. I don't even know if I was drinking that much then. That was kind of before I really embraced that this is what it was. I was drinking a lot, but this was just like, I would get up to, take the kids to school, walk the dog, and then get back in the bed. And just it's like a dull, almost like a physical ache. It can feel physical. I love what David Foster Wallace said. He ended up committing suicide, but this brilliant writer said it's like a nausea of the soul, depression, and I think that's really true. And, that's how I felt. And, losing my mom was just, that just was just horrific. It just, she was like I said, like the person that really got me. It was later having girlfriends, but, my whole life just kind of would look at me and just know, without me saying anything. And, and she was so just wise, and so it was hard to lose her.
Yeah, really. I can imagine. She just got you.
Yeah.
I remember my mom was the first person who actually stated that I was weird, and because I can't remember. This is random, but I remember just because T was talking about your mom getting you. I don't remember what the conversation was, but I said something like, "I'm weird, I know." She's like, "Yeah, you are a little weird, but that's okay." And I honestly was like, "I am weird." Yes, you agree. Someone agrees, because normally if you say that to people, they're like, "You're not weird."
How old were you when she said that?
This may have been, I don't know, within the past 10 years or so. It was very recent. It wasn't even like a childhood thing. It was very recent. And it was so funny because I had always thought that, but all that to say, echo what you said just about, I totally get this thing that this is the person who just gets you. Yeah, totally get it. Now, one of the quotes from your book, you said, "My breakdown was about me learning to own my sensitivity and love myself in all of my vulnerability, all of my privilege, confusion, and loss." So I want to ask you, how did you learn to own your sensitivity, especially in a world where I feel like we all sort of walk around wearing the quote unquote mask, right?
It was like, that was part of the therapy. That was part of the thing that saved me. It was just like uttering things that you just thought were the worst thing that you could say, think, be, and have someone say to you, yeah, heard that before. Yeah, yawn, been there, done that. And just, so that helped me kind of like go, yeah, and what the fuck? What am I doing? What am I, trying to prove? And I probably, again, when my mom died, because with my mom, I was all of that. She saw all that. She knew all that. But I think, maybe some of that, and this is occurring to me while I'm talking to you, that because I had that place to be, that maybe it was easier, I don't know if that's the right word, to put on this facade out in the world, I mean, I don't think I did that. I know I didn't do that with my friends or with my husband, but, because it's a lot. I mean, I'm a lot of like emotional stuff, and so, when you're like that, you feel like, ooh, I shouldn't put that on people. Ooh, I should,
And those other people provide a safe place for you.
Right. Exactly. So, and now it's just like, you know what, this is it. And some of it's just getting older where you're like, and I also want to model for my kids.
Yeah.
And they actually model that for me, because they're both very much who they are,
It's so funny how so many kids are like that. I don't know if all kids, but I know all the kids that I know are certainly very bold, or just not even bold, but just as you said, fully being themselves.
Right, because my son, I mean, I don't know that I would call him bold, but he has always been himself. We were driving past MKA, which is like a private school in town where he went to camp. He didn't go there for school, but they would have, it's a circular driveway, and for camp, they, every day would be a different theme, like Inside Out Day, Hat Day, Pajama Day. And he's like 4, and I would, say, oh, Ford, you want to do this tomorrow? Nope. So the other day we were driving, he's 16 now, we were driving by, and I was reminding him that this was happening. He was like, yeah, I want to do that. He said, I don't do it now. Like at high school, they do Spirit Day where they wear, Munker High stuff. I don't do it. I mean, and he's just clear. He's always been that way.
Doesn't feel pressure from other people to do because everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, and I just am really proud of him. I mean, sometimes it drives me crazy only because, like last night, he said, I was trying to get him to talk. He's struggling with his coach in baseball and, not playing. And he's always played, never been on the bench, and now he is. And it's killing me to watch. But so I'm trying to get him to talk about it. And he says, he says something, he mumbles. He always mumbles. He's got a deep voice and he mumbles. So whatever he said to me was really clear. Like his diction was very crisp. And so I was like, oh my God, you can speak where people can understand you. I said, why do you do that mumbling thing? He goes, because I really don't like to talk. I'm like, okay. So that part I don't really like. I wish that he were more like my daughter, who's like, tells me everything, But,
I like his own way of communicating.
Yeah. I do. I like that.
I love that he's like, I could speak like that, but I choose not to. So did you also have to get through, Benilde, this point of getting over, quote unquote, what I call your shoulds? Like, I should be happy because I have this, or I should be doing this, or...
Oh, Elayne, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That was a big part of it. That was a huge part of it. And that's what, so right now, if I'm on a mission, that's what it is, to help women release that, because it's killing us.
Literally killing us.
I'm all about, transparent, vulnerable, and authentic, because the other way is just, it's not worth it, and it's killing us, and you're just not going to be happy. And you look around and it's like, and that's what, that's basically what my novels have been about, especially the last 3. The Itch was, touched on that. And then the last 2, well, not so much who does she think she is, but definitely Acting Out. That's what it's about. Everything looks really great, and she is miserable because she's an artist and she's not being an artist. So,
In what ways have you chosen to work with women, in addition to your work, of course, to help us get past these stages of shoulds or dealing with depression, recognizing depression, all of that?
Well, just on the book tours that I do, that I have to set up myself because
right.
more. So whenever I get a chance to speak, whenever I'm asked to speak or, go around, I that's what I like to do.
And being open about your own story.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, when I do it, and I can't even tell you how many women come up to me and say, oh my God, thank you. I've been really struggling with this or that. And, not necessarily like clinical depression, but just struggling to be who they are,
What would you say your support network looks like now?
Well, I have friends who I've had my girls that I've had forever. My best friend is really more like my sister. We've been friends since high school, which is like 40 years. And then my other really good friend who had the nerve to up and move to Sydney, Australia.
Whoa.
I know. She's amazing. She wrote a self-published book a couple of years ago called Spinsterlicious. She never wanted to get married. She never wanted kids. Real clear about that. And she has just lived her life in this way that I so admire. Her job asked her to go. So she does have a career. But so the whole time thing is totally upside down. But she's certainly one of my, has been since we were in our 20s. And, my other, I have two friends who live here who I see and rely on a lot. And these two are fairly new friends. I mean, one I've known for a long time, but we got really close after my mom died, which was 8 years ago, because her mom had died a couple of years before, and she was also super close to her mother. So, yeah, it's like these women are just, I don't know what I would do without these girlfriends. I mean, just rock solid, So, and then I got my family. My family has shrunk because, my mom's gone. My dad has serious dementia. My father-in-law is gone. And my mother-in-law moved to Vegas to be with her man, who was her boyfriend in high school in the Bronx.
What?
Her love. I mean, they were like in love. And the parents, her mom actually sent him away because they thought, she was too young. And his wife died. After her husband had been dead, I don't know, say 5 years, his wife was dead like 6 months. He looked up, they have one mutual friend in the Bronx, like who keeps in touch with everybody from the neighborhood. So he reaches out, and Jackie put, my mother-in-law and them back together. Anyway, so she moved out there with him 2 years ago.
Never too late.
I know. She's 81.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I love that.
I know. Isn't that great?
Never too late. Lived their lives, married other people, moved on. I just saw a story like that on television. Another couple in their 80s or so that they were high school sweethearts. They had married and lived lives, and they reconnected somehow, and they got married.
Really? Where'd you see that?
This was on the news. It was, they were somewhere in the South. I can't remember, but they... Yeah,
people keep telling me to write about it, but I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, but it's just so interesting. So in closing, Benilde, if you think over your life and career, and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be, and what would you say?
I think, it'd have to be my mom. And I can't imagine any of it. I mean, she saw, and I just went to see Trevor Noah, and he talked a lot about his book, and which was a lot about his mother. And I was sitting there with chills, like he was just, he grew up in a township, in South Africa. So you can imagine, poor. And then with all these legalized, these restrictions, on Black people and what you couldn't do. And she was just constantly breaking the rules. She would just, you were supposed to leave the town unless you were, going to work, and you had to have a pass and all this. And she would drive him, and he had this beat up car that ran like once a month. She would drive him out to the fabulous white suburbs where you were not supposed to be.
Right.
And, they'd have these high, brick walls, and she would lift him up on her shoulders and say, tell me what you see. And, he's describing, all this beautiful lawn and this and this, that. And he says, I don't know how she knew. That's just one superficial example. But he said, I don't know how she knew how to give me what she gave when she didn't have it. Meaning, like, she didn't know hardly anything.
Mm-hmm.
But she
exposed him to something different.
Yeah, and just gave him so much. And that was my mom. I don't know how she knew a lot. She didn't have a loving, nurturing mom. She had a distracted, hurt mother who had too many children. My grandmother was a widow with her first husband, having had 2 children with him, and then marries her second husband and has 9 children with him, and he's abusive. He's awful to her and to the children. And so, that was my mother's mother. And so she didn't have a model for being a loving, fiercely loving, supportive mother, but she was. And it's a marvel to me. She gave us, everything she thought we should have, all kind of lessons and braces for my brother. And when we couldn't afford something, when my dad's salary didn't cover it, she already had a job. She had a full-time job working at night for 32 years. But she would get like a part-time job, My brother, my middle brother, was in college, and he was on the dean's list, like always. And he wanted more money or something, like spending money. And he was like, well, if I get a job, I'm going to mess up my grades. And she bought that. So she went out and became a cashier across the street at our school for lunchtime, And so just opened her whole everything to us. So she would be the one.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
So now tell us how we can support you. As I said, I'll have links to everything, but let us know what you're up to, website we should go to, any social media. Tell us how we can support you.
Well, any like reading the books and posting and telling your friends, go out and buy them. I just, and I hate like being like that, but that's the entrepreneurial part that I've had to,
you have to embrace it.
Right. And just, I used to see people like, that's so gross. But yeah. So, get on social media. Say, I just read this book, go out and buy it, and, so I'm on Twitter. I'm not a big tweeter, but I'm on Twitter.
You're on Instagram.
Little. I love Instagram. Mm-hmm. I am on Instagram, and that's, Benilde Little, and then Facebook. I have an author page, Benilde Little author page, and what else? I don't have a website anymore. Oh, and I have my blog, which is benildelittle.wordpress.com.
Okay,
and that's welcome to my breakdown, but you only need my name.
Excellent. I will make sure we link to all of that. Benilde, thank you so much. I'm so glad we were able to work it out.
Me too, Elayne. Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you.
You too. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything? Your career is not you. And as much as, especially if you're doing it on your own, it will consume you. But you got to hold on to that, because I think if you hold on to that, then that career, it's seamless. I look at Monique with this most recent venture. She's got a reality show coming on, and that Oprah picked up. And, when I saw the pilot, before they got it picked up, and she sent it to me, and I was like, oh my God, this is so happening. This is so going to happen. She is herself so much in this show, and so she has, just woven who she is into her work. And I think that's key, and that's the key when people say, oh, eat, sleep, grind, or whatever that saying is. I think for me, the only way to really do that is to, I think it's more than loving what you do. It's kind of like being, like your thing, like supportive sexually. That's who you are. You're like, you support women. You believe in that. This is not just
brand that you've come up with. So that's
right.
what
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Benilde. Again, you can go to supportissexypodcast.com to get more information on the fantastic women that she mentions in this episode, and to also get links to all of Benilde's books. They'll all be in there for you, easy to access and to pick up so you can read them all, especially her new one, Welcome to My Breakdown. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while or you're a newcomer, I truly appreciate you being here. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. On Apple Podcasts, which used to be iTunes, or on Stitcher or Google Play or SoundCloud, wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe, because I want to make sure that you don't miss an episode. We are here for you 5 days a week. I want to make sure that you don't miss a thing. So be sure that you go right now and hit subscribe if you have not already. All right, so thank you so much again for listening. I truly appreciate you. And now you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.